You know that Monday morning when your alarm goes off and you don't just feel tired, you feel absolutely nothing. It's not dread exactly. It's not even resistance. It's a kind of flatness, like the emotional part of you that used to care about your work has just gone offline. You look at your to do list and you can't access the version of yourself who once found any of it meaningful. If you've ever described this to a friend and they said you just need a vacation and you knew in your gut that's not it, then what you were experiencing might have been something the World Health Organization formally recognized in 2019 as an occupational phenomenon, not a medical condition, not a personal failure. A syndrome with a specific structure, a specific cause, and this is the part that matters most. Specific recovery pathways that actually make sense once you understand the psychology behind it. Welcome to Mind Decoded. I'm Dr. Ann.
And I'm Zach. Dr. Ann, I have a feeling today's episode is going to hit a little close to home for a lot of people, myself included. What are we unpacking?
Burnout syndrome. And I want to be really careful about how we frame this because burnout has become one of those words people throw around casually. I'm so burnt out after a long week. But the clinical picture, the one researchers have been studying for almost 50 years, is actually much more specific and honestly more useful to understand. It's not just exhaustion, it's a progressive unraveling that happens in 3 distinct stages. And the order of those stages tells us something really important about how to reverse it.
Okay, so when you say burnout isn't just exhaustion, that already challenges how I've always thought about it. I assumed burnout was basically extreme tiredness from working too much. Like if you just slept for a weekend and took some time off, it would fix itself.
And that assumption, which is incredibly common, is exactly why so many people stay stuck. Because they treat burnout as a quantity problem. Too many hours, too many tasks, not enough rest. And so the solution logic follows reduce hours, reduce tasks, increase rest. But if that were the whole picture, then every person who takes a 2-week vacation would come back fully restored. And we both know that's not what happens.
No, it's definitely not. I've taken vacations where I spent the whole time just feeling this low-grade dread about going back, and then the moment I sat down at my desk again, it was like the vacation never happened. Within about 45 minutes, I was right back to that flat, disconnected feeling.
That's the thing. Burnout isn't primarily about the volume of work. It's about the psychological relationship between you and your work. And the landmark research on this goes back to the 1970s, to a psychologist named Christina Maslach. She was studying people in high-emotion professions, healthcare workers, social workers, therapists, and she kept noticing this pattern that didn't fit the standard stress models. People weren't just tired. They were changing. Their personalities at work were changing. They were becoming cynical, detached, almost mechanical in how they interacted with the people they were supposed to be helping.
Wow. So this wasn't originally about corporate office workers at all. It was about people whose jobs involve deep emotional engagement.
Exactly. And that's an important origin story because it tells us something about the core mechanism. Burnout doesn't emerge from having too much to do. It emerges from a breakdown in the emotional contract between a person and their work. Maslach identified 3 dimensions, and the World Health Organization later adopted them, almost exactly as she described them. Dimension 1, emotional exhaustion. That's the feeling of being emotionally drained, depleted, like you have nothing left to give. Dimension 2, depersonalization or cynicism. That's when you start developing a detached, callous attitude toward your work and the people affected by it. And Dimension 3, reduced personal accomplishment, a growing sense that nothing you do matters, that you're ineffective, that your work is meaningless.
Okay, so those 3 dimensions, exhaustion, cynicism, and feeling ineffective, I have to say, hearing them laid out like that, I'm already recognizing a sequence in my own experience. The exhaustion came first for me. I remember about 2 years ago at my previous job, I was working on this big product launch, and I just felt completely drained all the time. But I told myself that was normal, just a busy season. What I didn't see coming was the cynicism part that hit me maybe 6 months later, and it was way more disturbing.
Tell me about that. What did the cynicism actually feel like?
It was weird. I started catching myself rolling my eyes during meetings. I'd hear a colleague get excited about a new idea, and instead of feeling curious, I'd think, here we go again, another initiative that'll fizzle out in 3 months. And the scary part, I didn't even recognize that version of myself. I've always been the optimistic guy on the team, the one who gets people energized, and suddenly I was the person draining energy from the room. I didn't like myself very much during that period.
What you're describing is the exact progression that Maslach's research predicts. And here's the part that surprised me most when I first read this research. The reason cynicism is so psychologically dangerous isn't just that it makes you unpleasant to work with. It's that cynicism is actually a protective strategy your brain deploys when emotional exhaustion has gone on too long.
Wait, so the cynicism isn't just a symptom, it's something my brain was doing on purpose?
In a way, yes. Think of it like this. Your emotional resources are a finite tank. When you're in a state of chronic emotional exhaustion, your brain recognizes at a level below conscious awareness that you keep pouring emotional energy into your work and getting depleted with no real replenishment. So your brain develops a defense mechanism. It starts reducing the emotional significance of your work. It says, this doesn't really matter. These people's opinions don't really matter. The outcome doesn't really matter. That detachment cushions you from further emotional drain. It's a psychological callus.
That is so unsettling to hear, because it reframes my cynicism as something almost smart that my brain was doing to protect me. But it also explains why it didn't feel like a choice. It wasn't like I decided one day to become bitter and detached. It just sort of arrived.
And once you understand the mechanism, it also explains why vacations don't fix it. A vacation might give you some physical rest, and it might temporarily refill your emotional tank a little. But if you go back to the same environment that created the conditions for exhaustion and cynicism, your brain's protective cynicism kicks right back in. Because from your brain's perspective, the threat hasn't changed. You're walking back into the same emotionally depleting situation. The callus reforms almost instantly.
So you're saying the cynicism is a learned protection, and it sticks around because the environment that taught it to your brain hasn't changed. Okay, then what about the third dimension, that feeling of reduced accomplishment? Where does that fit in?
That's the dimension that often arrives last, and it's particularly cruel because it attacks your sense of identity. Once you're emotionally exhausted and you've become cynical about your work, you're not performing at the level you used to. Because you can't. You're depleted, you're detached. So naturally, the quality of your output drops. And then you look at your work and think, see, I knew I wasn't good at this. I'm not making a difference. None of this matters. And that belief further deepens the exhaustion and cynicism. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle.
That's exactly how it felt. It was like a downward spiral where each part fed the others. I was tired, so I couldn't care. Because I couldn't care, I did worse work. Because I did worse work, I felt like a failure. Because I felt like a failure, I got more tired. And around it went.
And look, once you understand the mechanism behind this, you might actually feel more compassion for yourself. Because this isn't a character flaw, it's a predictable psychological response to a specific set of conditions. Christina Maslach's research showed that burnout isn't primarily a problem with the individual. It's a problem with the fit between the individual and 6 key areas of their work environment.
6 areas. Okay, what are they?
Workload, that's the one everyone thinks about, but it's only one of 6. Control, do you have autonomy over how you do your work? Reward, are you adequately recognized and compensated, not just financially but socially and emotionally? Community, do you have supportive relationships at work or is the environment toxic and isolating? Fairness, are decisions made transparently and equitably? And values, does the organization's mission align with your personal values or are you being asked to do things that conflict with who you are?
Wow. So when people say I'm burnt out, what they're often experiencing is a breakdown in several of those 6 areas simultaneously. Not just workload. For me, thinking back, it wasn't just the hours, it was that I'd lost a sense of control. Every decision felt like it was being made above my head. And the fairness piece was huge. I watched some people get promoted for political reasons, while others who did great work got ignored. That ate at me more than the late nights ever did.
That's the insight, and it's why the most effective recovery pathways don't start with take more breaks or practice self care. Those things matter, but they're downstream. The upstream intervention is about restoring fit in those 6 areas. Sometimes that means having hard conversations about autonomy. Sometimes it means seeking a team where the values align better with yours. Sometimes it means renegotiating what recognition looks like, so you're not pouring emotional energy into a void.
I love that phrase, renegotiating fit, because it frames burnout recovery not as fixing yourself, but as adjusting the conditions your brain is responding to. That feels so much more empowering than you need better work-life balance.
And the research backs this up. Studies on burnout interventions consistently find that organization level changes, things like increasing employee autonomy, improving communication around decisions, ensuring fair processes, are significantly more effective than individual level interventions like stress management training. Not that individual strategies are useless, but they're incomplete if the environment stays the same.
So what's something a listener could do tomorrow, especially if they're the one recognizing these patterns in themselves right now?
Start with identification rather than action. Map your experience onto those 3 dimensions. Ask yourself, am I emotionally exhausted, or is this just physical tiredness? Am I cynical and detached in ways that feel unlike me? Do I feel ineffective and meaningless in my work? If you're hitting 2, or especially all 3, that's a signal worth paying attention to. Then look at Maslow's 6 areas. Which one is the primary source of breakdown for you? Is it really the workload, or is it the lack of control? The lack of recognition, the values mismatch. Getting clear on the source is the first step toward a solution that actually addresses the root cause.
That's a really practical starting point. And I think just having the language, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, reduced accomplishment already makes a difference, because when you're in it, it just feels like a vague fog of something's wrong with me. But when you can name the dimensions, it becomes a problem you can actually think about clearly.
That's exactly the goal. Naming it reduces the shame and increases the clarity. And if this episode has resonated with you, if you're recognizing some of these patterns in your own work life, take a moment to subscribe to Mind Decoded. We release a new episode every day, unpacking exactly this kind of psychology, the kind that helps you understand what your brain is actually doing and why.
And if today's episode hit close to home for you, share it with one colleague. You might be surprised how many people are experiencing the same thing but don't have the words for it yet. Sometimes just knowing the 3 dimensions changes the whole conversation.
Here's what I want you to take into your day. The next time you catch yourself feeling cynical or detached at work, don't judge yourself for it. Instead, get curious. Ask yourself, when did this start? What was happening in my work life around that time in terms of control, recognition, fairness, values? That curiosity by itself is the beginning of recovering your agency. Because you're no longer just a person who's burning out. You're a person who understands the psychological structure of what's happening. And understanding is the first step toward changing it.
That's a powerful reframe. Thanks, Dr. Ann. I think a lot of people needed to hear this one.
Thanks, Zach. We'll see everyone tomorrow for another episode of Mind Decoded.